This past week, the world passed another grim milestone, 5 million cases of the coronavirus. And now, as the US and many countries in Europe begin to ease their lockdowns, they are starting to ask, what went wrong? What caused the greatest global disruption since the Second World War? Already, blame is being pointed directly at the Chinese government. International backlash is growing against Beijing's initial handling of those crucial moments back in December, when the virus first emerged in Wuhan. Although the harshest criticism against China is coming out of the White House, many countries are now beginning to reconsider their economic ties to the world's largest exporter. Let's take a look at this report.
It has shut down the global economy. The constant.
So just how severe could the growing backlash against China get? To discuss that from London, I'm joined by Xiaolan Fu, who is a professor at Oxford University, and from Istanbul, I'm joined by Altay Atli, who is a lecturer and researcher at the Asian Studies program at Bogazici University. Xiaolan, Altay, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you here. So why threats about decoupling and isolating China are grabbing headlines? The nation remains the world's biggest manufacturer, largest exporter, and largest consumer. So, Xiaolan, how realistic is it to break away from China's supply chain?
I think this is a trend that has already occurred before the pandemic due to the rising protectionism and also nationalism in some of the countries, and also the trade war, mainly between the US and China. And this was enabled by the fourth industrial revolution, the digitization, and made it possible to some extent in some industries. However, to talk about this as a broad trend, and like a fundamental decoupling from China, I don't think that will come true, because the basics of the economic rules, economics, were still working. So the profits, efficiency, and the large market of China, and the well-developed supply chains within China, all this will all come into play. So yes, there will be a balance.
There will be a balance. We also see international companies shifting production out of China to South Asian countries, as well as developing countries like Turkey, India, in order to optimize and diversify supply chains. So, Altay, what parameters do you think companies should consider as they reconfigure supply chains and their approach to international markets?
Sure. Well, first of all, the whole idea of supply chains is being rethought, revised, because supply chains, well, companies were working through supply chains in order to reduce their costs. But now we have seen with the coronavirus process, we have seen that this is also bringing risks because the wider your supply chains are, well, fine, you are reducing costs, but at the same time, you are also increasing your risks. So in the period after the coronavirus, this will be the first item that the companies will prevent. How much risk can I take? And how much am I willing to reduce my cost? But the other thing is, of course, why are you investing overseas? Why are you investing in China? Now, if you are after low costs, China isn't a low-cost country anymore. For that, you need to go somewhere else. But China itself is changing as well. Now, China is investing in technology. China is climbing up the value-added ladder. So if you are after technology, if you are after sharing know-how and technology and so on, then China will still be a choice. So I think, well, we are entering a new period. Many countries will give up working with supply chains because simply the risks are now too high. But the thing is, of course, the whole concept of supply chains will remain in a modified way, maybe more regionalized, maybe more localized, and it will be a matter of your calculations of cost and benefit.
So where does this leave Turkey, in your opinion? Can Turkey benefit from the trade war between US and China when it comes to supply chains?
Well, I think that benefiting is not the right word because we have entered a period that nobody is benefiting. Nobody is really benefiting from the trade war. Yes, maybe in the short term, sure, but not in the long term. Nobody in the long term. But Turkey can position itself like if the supply chains are regionalizing, if the new period is about creating clusters of supply hubs, Turkey can be a regional hub. So I'm not going to use the word benefiting, but it will be about repositioning yourself, and Turkey will be in a position to to take its place in this realigned global economy.
All right. Xiaolao, China's economy has experienced its fastest drop last quarter since 1992. How may this foreshadow what is to come for countries who are currently in the middle stages of the coronavirus outbreak?
China is deeply hit by the coronavirus in the first quarter. The growth rate was minus 6%. However, I think because of the very stringent quarantine measures introduced, they have been so far being able to control the situation, although we cannot predict whether there will be a second wave. And so people are working hard for the economic recovery. So crisis in Chinese means challenges, but also means opportunities. So I very much agree with the repositioning the argument. So China also needs to use this opportunity to turn it as an opportunity to reposition it.
How will China do that? Because it's being criticized for not being open, for not being transparent. So will we see China more transparent in the coming future?
I think continue to open up and at a higher level of opening. I think this is a consistent message has been given by the Chinese government. They have a lot of motivation, reason to continue to do this because China benefited from globalization. So, and also the government now is emphasizing on the new infrastructure. The so-called new infrastructure is the infrastructure in digital technology for the next generation of technology, all the emerging technology, AI, artificial intelligence, blockchain, Internet of Things, etc., but including 5G too. So China is pushing, is upgrading through this way, and also recognize that there will be a kind of repositioning and also diversification of the value chain. So it should prepare for this more proactively by upgrading.
So we also see this pandemic exposed weak links in this globalization model, Altay. So there's a need, especially for countries, to rethink and readjust industrial layout. Xiao just mentioned the technology, but for example, for Turkey, where does this leaves Turkey?
Well, well, it's not the end of globalization, but we are entering a period of modified globalization, or globalization version 2 or 3, whatever you want to call it. So this will be a period where countries will do two things. Well, including Turkey, of course. First of all, if you don't want to be that vulnerable, you need to improve your own capabilities in every area: technology, defense industry, energy, finance, whatever. So reducing dependencies on the outside world, being more self-sufficient. That's the first thing. But total self-sufficiency is impossible. It's it simply doesn't exist. So therefore, to the extent you depend on the other world, the other thing that the countries will be striving towards will be diversifying your partners. You won't want to diversify on one single partner in any given area, because that's vulnerability as well. That's what the countries have experienced when the coronavirus first hit China, and everybody was panicked because overexposure to Chinese market was a disaster for them.
Yeah, too reliant. Yes.
Yes. So two things. Globalization will continue, but interdependence, the idea of interdependence, will be rethought, and countries will make sure that they will reduce their dependencies by improving their own capacities. And the second thing is, to the extent you depend on the rest of the world, you will have to diversify so that if something goes wrong in one part of your portfolio, you just don't go down the hill like that.
So having mentioned dependency, Xiaolu, is it too early to make predictions for the future of the Belt and Road project, especially for Africa, where nations are tremendously under debt burden? What's going to happen next?
I think the implementation of the Belt and Road Initiative is also affected by the pandemic. What I have heard from my fieldwork is that some of the investments have been not able to implement as planned because people's restrictions of people's movement. However, I think the Belt and Road will still going on, maybe at a different scale, and also in China, people are talking about high quality Belt and Road. So if this is a Belt and Road initiative which is more inclusive, more sustainable, and also more with a lower level of risk for China. But there is a demand, like Africa country, like you said exactly. They need investment for the post-coronavirus economic recovery. So for the supply and the demand side, there are the both sides that still interest meets each other. So the Belt and Road will still move forward, but I think it will be at different scale, and also the quality and the risk control will be a very important item in the consideration.
All right, I'm afraid we'll have to leave it here. Xiao, Altay, thank you very much for joining us on Straight Talk. Appreciate it a lot.